Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Okay. I have got Suzi Pritchard-Jones. I've reeled her in from the thoroughbred industry. This is interesting today. There is a conversation going on within therapeutic riding about off-the-track thoroughbreds and whether or not they can or should do our kind of equine-assisted work. And it's interesting. People have very, very strong feelings about this, often negatively. And this has often surprised me. But that's because I grew up with thoroughbreds. That was the only horse I knew as a teenager. Warm bloods just weren't even a thing in England at that time. They crept in later. We had something called the Hunter Improvement Society, which turned into the British warm blood, but we were years off. Of course, we had hunters and crossbreds and cobs and things like that. But thoroughbreds were what most of us cut our teeth on, and we absolutely realized that we could repurpose, particularly the steeplechasers, quite easily to do various types of job within the eventing, jumping sort of a world, and obviously hunting. And although you did get the odd one that was a bit of a nutter, actually the vast majority of them were really, really good once they knew the job. So it's clear from me talking that I am on team thoroughbred, but it's understandable for people who don't really know them and are nervous of them, why they might be skeptical. And of course, we also know that there can be a big difference between a flat racer, very, very hot, perhaps not terribly strong in the back, et cetera, and a big solid steeplechaser. But that said, there's a lot more to it because we know that the industry, the thoroughbred industry, is not a popular one, even within the horse world. And we know that our therapy work is getting more and more attention. And whether or not we think thoroughbreds should or shouldn't be used in what we do, and whether or not we think the racing industry should or shouldn't exist, the fact is that both do exist. And I think that if we don't explore this and explore this in some depth, then we are not doing due diligence within our own practice. So anyway, Suzi Pritchard-Jones is a breeder of racehorses. She's also someone who cares very much about the thoroughbred horse, as well as humans. And she divides her time between Ireland and Florida, although she breeds her racehorses in the UK. And she is well versed in this industry. And she had the good graces to come and attend our Horseboy Tribe Day, which we had in Ireland this year in 2025, and educate us a little bit about what the possibilities might be between the work we do and the thoroughbred industry. So without further ado, I've rambled as I always do. Suzi, welcome on the show. Thanks for coming on. Why on earth do you even give a flying beep about the work we do? And because we know we all thoroughbred people, you're just all in it for the money, aren't you? And why this curiosity around thoroughbreds and the work of healing humans?
Well, Rupert, thank you firstly for having me on the show. I mean, I'm hugely honored. And when you asked me, I said, this is going to be a really short one, Rupert. It'll be about 2 minutes because I don't know.
Great, we will go off down the pub then.
Well, out of me. But I grew up on a stud farm in Ireland. My father bred horses and sold them and raced them. And I grew up with a hairy Shetland pony and then a Welsh cob. And I hunted, show jumped, cross country, loved to go fast. And then I started show jumping some 3/4 bred. So they were 3/4 thoroughbred, and probably the other part would be Connemara or Irish Draught horses. And then I got sucked into riding out thoroughbreds which is great fun because you get to go fast.
Just quickly, not everyone knows what riding out means. Can you just explain the terminology?
You go to every morning, the trainers take the sets of thoroughbreds to the gallops and they have exercise riders. So I got to be an exercise rider.
Short stirrups, bum in the air like a jockey.
All of the above.
Cring nuts on a young thoroughbred.
Beyond for dear life. I actually was looking at a short video this morning that had been made in Australia. And they were talking about, how it was so wrong and they used to domineer horses and make the horses do what they want. And there was one woman who was a breeder of horses. She said she'd bred 80 foals and she made her horses do what she wanted them to do. And I thought, well, number one, I had a little hairy Shetland pony that landed me down its neck first off. And we had
good luck with making that thing do anything. Yeah.
Had an old stud groom, and he said, here's her before the fence, here's her over the fence, and here's her when you land. Because she didn't really want to jump, and she put me off more times than, probably had hot dinners at that age. And then after that, when I had my Welsh cob, he used to run off with me all the time. And goes riding the racehorses. And very often it's on a wing and a prayer. And it's like a lot of trust and faith in each other. And you get to that point where they really want to go. And you're holding on as hard as you can till you reach that point where they just take a breath and they relax. But you can't they take you to the edge sometimes. And if you can't just relax and sit there and not panic, they're going to go with you. So this idea of dominating horses, it was something very foreign to me because I wouldn't say I had a huge amount of bottle anyway, as in nerve. So it was always a question of working with them. Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't want to go there. Well, how can we go over here and then we go around and we go there and then everybody's happy. So it was that relationship that you developed without.
No, I would agree. I'm often perplexed myself when people talk about people forcing horses to do things because it's actually not a terribly easy thing to do. But I think maybe what they mean is just being a bit shitty to the horse, and if the emotion coming towards the horse is always kind of negative and kind of, I want you to do this thing you don't really want to do, rather than trying to show you how this might be something we want to do together. I suppose that you do get that type of personality type in the horse world, as in anywhere, right? People that really want to control. But I would agree with you. I wouldn't say that is, in the old days, I'm now old, I wouldn't say that was really the norm. Even though there's a mythology now, I agree that it was the norm. But I agree with you. I don't really think it ever was.
I think if you grew up hunting like we did, Rupert, your horses, your ponies, they loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, my Welsh cob, as somebody tried to jump a fence in front of him, they could fall into the ditch. Didn't matter. He didn't even give me a chance to look at it.
He was going.
He was gone. But if nobody tried that fence, he wouldn't go to the hell of high water, wouldn't get him over it. So
yeah, absolutely. It was, but I think the thing with the hunting world too, again, whatever you think morally about hunting, because you can also go drag hunting, you don't have to go, real hunting. But when you go out in a group like that, across country, the horses are in their big social herd. They're loving it. They're clearly loving it. I agree. It's so much about the need to stay alive too. If you're the monkey sitting up there, you don't want to go against your horse. And I think we all learn that quite quickly. So, yeah.
And that kind of leads very nicely into why I think the work that you're doing and so many other people are doing, giving help through horses, it brings us back to this age-old relationship that we've had with horses. We've walked beside horses for over 6,000 years. And were it not for the horse, it's been a partnership between horse and human. Were it not for the horse, we would not be where we are today.
Very true.
Horse that helped create civilization. So we've always had this bond with horses up until the last 80 to 100 years. And we have lost that now. And there's a marvelous connection that anybody who is around horses has. And we've all been really privileged to have them in our life because they're therapists. They are natural therapists. And I see so many young teenagers that are going through hell and they're isolated. And now since COVID and with the dependence on technology that we have, we've got a whole generation that are very, very isolated from humans. And depression is a big thing.
I would agree, particularly interestingly among young men. It used to be considered rather a female thing, that type of depression, and it's switched, it seems, almost now, post-COVID. And we have a whole generation of boys that won't come out of the basement. And we call it the lost boys. But I believe it doesn't have to be so. But nature and the mind are where we need to be concerned with this. And what does a horse do? Of course, but connect us that way. So I'm absolutely with you on that, and that I don't really see any coercion. And any thoroughbred that I ever met, because they're bred to run, runs joyfully. I am absolutely of the opinion that you certainly don't need to coerce or force a thoroughbred to run. They will run because they like to run. They do it in the field. They'll do it at any opportunity. It's what they like to do. I've got human friends that like to do that as well, by the way. And they are built a bit different to me. They're generally longer and stringier than I am. And they love to run, So, okay, we can accept that there is a running gene in a horse, and that if you breed to that, you get horses that are very desirous of doing that. Sure. But why do you give, again, a flying bleep about the work that we do?
Because I think everybody needs horses in their lives. I think we've always had them. And it's only, like you say, in the last 80 to 100 years that we've had access. You see it in your work with autistic children, when parents will say, the child smiled for the first time in however long, or maybe ever. But you see it in any kid that is not afraid and wants to get on a pony. You see that beam from here to here.
Absolutely.
You're happy.
Even so, you're a thoroughbred chick, and you haven't really touched our work until now. So something must have sparked your curiosity. And just to play devil's advocate against myself, I also did not spend the first decades of my life wanting to do equine assisted work. No, thank you at all. It only happened when my son, as we know, forged his own relationship with a horse, went from non-verbal to verbal. And I realized I had to follow this, and I had to follow it to the hilt. But I absolutely do not hold it against people to not necessarily be interested until a certain point. But I'm always interested in why someone's interest gets sparked. What's the catalyst? And did you have any incidents when you were younger, as a teenager, or in your earlier life, or even later, where psychologically or emotionally there was some trigger point for you? For example, for me, in my personal life, take my son out of it. When I was in my early adolescence, I was having a very, very tough time at school. And I got to a point where I couldn't get out of bed. And I was effectively one of those lost boys for a little bit. And it was horses that got me out. So I knew from very early that I owed what passes as sanity for me to ponies. So have there been any catalysts like that in your life?
Sure. I had a very lucky and privileged upbringing, but I was an only child. And my pony was my salvation. It was, there were a lot of, my parents were very Victorian and very strict. And it didn't conform that easily.
I can feel the pain.
Yeah, I didn't have a pair of denim jeans till I was about 70.
Okay.
So I was always trying to buck the establishment. So it was. And my pony was literally my sanity.
Mm.
So I really, I've always loved horses. And
Yeah, a pony is by its very nature both rock and roll and punk rock. Like,
yeah,
it's the soul of freedom and rebellion, isn't it?
because that's who they are.
Yeah.
The tipping point, as far as the therapeutic riding and EAS is concerned, was an organization called IFAR, the International Forum for the Aftercare of Racehorses, that was set up in 2016. They work mainly with regulatory bodies around the world, as opposed to boots on the ground. But they did make this marvelous video of, there was a ride in Deauville in France, and they had several therapeutic organizations there in attendance. And one of them was Horseback UK. And they had interviewed Jock Hutchinson, and he said, we have mainly thoroughbreds.
By the way, lads, listening to this, our podcast with Emma Hutchison from Horseback UK and Jay, her assistant and manager there, you must go back to Equine Assisted World and listen to that one because it's an amazing organization. Okay, sorry, back to you.
And the light bulb went off. And I thought, we've got the horse racing industry, which is the low-hanging fruit on the equestrian tree as far as animal rights people are concerned. And we have two things in the thoroughbred industry that are the low-hanging fruits and vulnerable areas. And one is breakdowns of racehorses, because that hits everybody on a visceral level, and it's just the most horrible thing if you've ever witnessed that and you don't have meant to do it. But unfortunately, it happens sometimes, just as you get wrecks in Grand Prix racing or cycling or various other
Really athletic endeavor. Yeah.
or anything that's slightly on the edge of danger. And the other thing was what was happening with retired racehorses. And most of them find second homes and second careers, but some of them don't. And that's a concern. And it's an area that is becoming under more and more scrutiny from the industry. And the industry worldwide is trying to address that, because you have to remember that we've had horse racing since the Greeks discovered one horse could run faster than the other.
We've had it longer than that. We've had it since the steppes. We've had it since the Tintashta people 6,000 years ago, when they first started to breed for the higher weather
once the human monkey figured out that it could horses back and rule the world. But the thoroughbred industry and thoroughbred racing has only been around since the 18th century. And the thoroughbred was bred by a very skilled group of men in North Yorkshire in the late 17th century, early 18th century. And typically until the middle part of the 20th century, the racing world comprised of owner breeders. So when a horse retired from racing, they would go back to these large estates or farms. Well, that whole picture started to change mid-20th century. And you had people who did not have land coming in and buying racehorses. And now you have syndicates. And so the whole landscape has changed. And the racing industry has been a bit on the back foot catching up with it. But the beginning. So when I saw the IFAR video, I thought, well, this is a no-brainer. Why aren't we using thoroughbreds in this world? We have an industry that's a global industry. It has a global media network. We can get the word out about what is happening. And we can get it because we have a very diverse group of owners. We get that word out, and then we get this thing going. And I'm at the point now where it's like, right, lads, stop mucking around and let's get this thing going, because it has huge potential. So that was the sort of light bulb, was the iPhone video.
So what's interesting to me about that is, okay, so that video, I know of that video, and the ride at Deauville, let's say someone's listening, who might not know what that meant. Deauville, that area of France is, of course, where the D-Day landings happened in World War II. And so these were veteran groups who do work with equine assisted work and veterans, having a really good idea, which was to go and do this ride on those beaches where the Normandy landings happened and all those tens of thousands of young men got killed on both sides, as a way of bringing our attention, not just to the sacrifice that was made back then. Otherwise, we'd probably all be speaking German right now. Although actually, I did just sit my B1 German exam. And so now I do actually speak German, but hey, but voluntarily, not at the point of a gun. And also it drew attention to the work that is done for post-traumatic stress disorder, because a lot of those men who survived World War II survived with what we then called shell shock, but we've come to call PTSD. And it was difficult for them to reintegrate to civilian life, and not all of them did. And the sacrifice that is made on the battlefield sometimes goes on for decades thereafter. You referred to Horseback UK, Jay, who runs the program there, who we did a podcast with a little while ago, he got his face blown off, and in Afghanistan. And, he said that's a really interesting thing, to lose your face, because your face is your identity. Whether you like your face or you don't like your face, it's you, and to not be you is a really, really, really strange thing. He said his leg getting blown off and that sort of thing, it's kind of a bit more like you. But the face, whoa. And even though reconstruction was done, you can imagine the psychological effect. And the horse, of course, has a wonderful thing with it. Now, you mentioned Horseback UK also because they use a lot of thoroughbreds. And in our own Horseboy program, particularly in California, interestingly enough, with Square Peg Foundation, Joelle Dunlap, who runs that, they're almost exclusively thoroughbreds. And quite a lot of our places in Ireland too. Laskinnet Farm has quite a few, with David Doyle, and of course where we did our tribe day at Stewart's Care in County Meath, there's a few thoroughbreds there. Interestingly, in Ireland, there's quite often, even though it's like one of the homes of the thoroughbred, there's often a real pushback an unexpectedly strong pushback among the therapeutic riding folk that thoroughbreds should not really be used for this. Why do you think that is? And what do you say to that?
I'm laughing because it's not necessarily thoroughbreds shouldn't be used for therapeutic work.
Okay.
This is all based on a perception, right? And I would say if you have 12 blonde-haired, blue-eyed men going up in an elevator to the 6th floor, by the time they get to the 1st floor, they'll have sorted themselves into the ones that have bigger ears and the ones that have smaller ears. And it's a natural human instinct. We have to sift and sort. And nobody likes the racing world, in the equestrian world. I've got a good South American friend from Argentina, and you find, we don't like the Brazilians, or we don't like the Bolivians. And it's the same in the equestrian world. We don't like the thoroughbred people. The thoroughbred people are seen as elitist, and we get all kinds of monkeys on us. And if you're riding a thoroughbred, and I'm sure you've probably found this, Rupert, if you're riding a thoroughbred and you're out on the hunting field and somebody will go, "Oh, that's a thoroughbred." And they think they're flighty and they're scatty and they're going to kick and they're going to do all kinds of things. Horses are what we make them. If we treat them with respect and expect them to have manners, expect them to stand, there's no reason they can't stand. There's no reason they can't have manners. They will do whatever you want them to do. Thoroughbreds really, really, really want to please. And some of them are high strung, but they're not all high strung. They're very sensitive. They're very reactive. They're incredibly intelligent. And they were bred. They're one of the few breeds that were really selectively bred for the best traits, including speed, but also for all the other traits, because they were bred by these really, really smart men in the 17th century.
What's interesting, like as you're talking to me about that hunt field experience, because there's a lot of times out of the hunt field, the thoroughbreds are flighty, but they're flighty unfortunately, because they're not set up for success. As you know, in the amateur racing world, which is point to pointing, you have to take the young thoroughbreds out and qualify them by hunting them a certain number of times with a hunt so that they can go and hunt race. And I've always thought that that was a tricky thing to do, because people then take out 4-year-old thoroughbreds in the hunt field, which is a, psychologically and emotionally pretty highly charged environment. And then the thoroughbreds do leap all over the place because they're just young horses leaping all over the place. And yeah, people naturally give them a wide berth, but it's being done just so that they can go in a hunt race later, rather than being correctly schooled so that they can just be calm on the hunt field. But as you said, I think that unfortunately that has added to the perception.
In the United States,
Yeah.
Ireland, they're all thoroughbreds on the hunt field.
Yeah.
And I worked for Michael Dickinson, who was a very famous English steeplechase trainer who had the first 5 home in the Gold Cup, and he went to America and started training in America. We used to bring the 3-year-olds out hunting on a Friday, and they loved it. Their little ears prick, they hear the hunting horn, they follow the hounds. They're not frightened. Will do anything you want it to do. And you've been to Square Peg, and I've seen the videos and photographs of Joelle's.
Absolutely.
And their hounds, You go into any racing yard, you can put a 2-year-old child on some of those horses' back.
Absolutely.
Just like.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you. I'm agreeing with, sometimes the perception has come because people make some poor choices about, where to put those young thoroughbreds, and that doesn't really serve the purpose. But I agree with you that in my experience, once you show a thoroughbred the job, they are exceptionally intelligent. So they will adapt to that job very, very fast. And even if they have come in from, thinking that the job is always to run, once you show them there's a different job, they're actually very versatile. And they're like, well, okay, yeah, I'll do that job instead. And then I'll get my jollies out when I go running in the field with my friends, or when my trainer takes me out for a nice, mood clearing gallop. And then when I go back in the arena with my special needs therapeutic riders, I'm good. And I work with, as you know, largely Lusitano horses because I like them, and they're super adaptable and versatile and very good dressage horses, and also very good jumpers, actually. I like them. And they can also be quite passionate. So I give them a lot of what I call crazy time. And I'm always telling people who have therapeutic practices of any kind, remember that any horse that you have is bred to be an athlete. Whether they're a pulling athlete or a jumping athlete or a racing athlete, they're bred to move. And it's a good idea to give them some playful movement in the course of their week, just for their mental health as much as anything else, in the same way that children, one would do it, where they don't have to be a thoroughbred to need that. All horses actually need that to some extent.
Well, I think, Rupert, what we haven't touched upon here is horsemanship.
Okay.
And you can have a bad Lusitana.
Yes.
A bad...
Well, you can make any horse bad, right?
Horse bad.
Yeah.
It's how...
I've been doing it all my life.
It's how you interact with your horse.
Yes.
Of any breed, it's what you expect from them.
I agree.
To give back to them. There are bad thoroughbreds, but they're mainly bad because people have made them that way. There are bad warm bloods. There are rotten ponies out there. But
Really, I didn't notice. Yeah.
That is what we have made them. So
I agree.
I think the most important thing is having good horse people and horsemen and women. You do have to know how to handle a thoroughbred. One of the most lovely things I learned at Tribe Day in Coquelin in August this year with you was your crazy time for your horses, where before you start working them, you let them out in school and you build some jumps and they can jump and run around, and they want. Any living creature is made up of energy.
Absolutely.
Unless you can express that energy, it gets bottled up and it becomes destructive. And you've
Yes.
got to do what you do, have the crazy time, have the downtime, let them have fun.
Exactly. I think horses, just like people, desperately need time to express themselves where they're not micromanaged. I think quite a lot of resentment builds up in humans when we micromanage each other, and the same thing with horses. And of course, with horses now, all horses are basically leisure horses these days. So there's a lot of expectation from the owner to perform. And this has created, I feel, sometimes an overly controlled environment, which horses end up resenting. And some of the explosions that we see now are not actually because the horse is bred to run or anything. It's because they're just pissed off because they don't, like a kid in school, just constantly being in class rather than, and now we know with schools, we have less and less sport, less and less recess, less and less playtime, less and less break, more and more academics. It's not good,
Or more problems.
Yeah, exactly. And then even if they pass all their exams, and they're just miserable, So that we get the logic of. And also, yes, you create the horse that you want. There's two stories that stand out for me in my life like that. Just to speak to your point now, it's a very good point when you said horses kind of will adopt the persona that you expect of them. How there's some people who love to ride hot horses and be the person who, and somehow they always have a hot horse under them. But often when you pass that horse to somebody else, it's not so hot. And it's like the horse just, no, well, I'm expected to be kind of hot. When I used to hunt as a teenager, I remember there was this man who was a fighter ace who'd been shot down in the Battle of Britain, and he'd lost his legs, and he'd lost his legs quite high. So it wasn't like he had them, to the knee or something with a prosthetic. His prosthetics went almost to his hip. And as you know, in that area of England where I used to hunt, which is Leicestershire, the fences, the jumps are big. So, and sometimes you get fields of up to 120 riders, out. So there's a lot of pushing and jostling and people getting run away with. And I remember one woman turning to him once and saying, "How come you never get run away with by your horses?" And quite a lot of his horses were thoroughbreds. And he said, "Madam, because if they did, I wouldn't be able to stop them." That was such a telling thing. For him, it was life or death. And then another life or death thing was one of the guys who first turned me on to in-hand work was a French master called Bernard Saxe. He's still out there, and he's really interesting because he's in a wheelchair. He was a stuntman, and he broke his back during a stunt. And he does his in-hand work with someone standing behind him in the chair and maneuvering him, and they have to read his mind, but where he wants to be. It's amazing to watch. And I was watching him do it in an aisle of Lusitano stallions, and the stallions could get their heads over the stable doors, and they couldn't quite get their teeth into the other, but they could certainly threaten to. And I was looking at this going on. I said, "Bernard, what are you going to do if this horse reacts and jumps on you?" He says, "Well, then, Rupert, I would die." But he said, "What you'll find, Rupert, is that in general, there are exceptions, but in general, the horses will take on the personality of the culture of the stable that you create yourself. You are the lead horse. And in my case, I choose for that to be pretty chill because my life depends on it. But yes, there's a risk. So I absolutely agree with you on that. One of the other things which I find intriguing, though, is the feeling I get is that you are getting into this work of advocacy for thoroughbreds in special needs work and healing work as much to save the thoroughbred itself as to help monkeys. And I rather like that because I feel that's a very honest place to come from. Could you elucidate a little bit? You said earlier that the racing industry is the low-hanging fruit, okay, for not only for the animal rights industry, well, it is an industry actually, the animal rights industry, but also because of its unpopularity within the equestrian world. And I'm sorry, but a lot of the racing people are their own worst enemies. They do come across as wankers, a lot of them. They just do. They do. And they could amend their behavior and just be cooler. And maybe they'll have to be later. But up until now, they have been a fairly elitist, closed bunch. When you meet them, they're not terribly welcoming. But that doesn't mean they're wrong or evil or anything. It just means that they're a bit autistic and tribal.
Okay.
However, that is many people's experience.
Yeah.
That doesn't come out of nowhere. The same with the hunting people. You know, hunting people have been their own worst enemies. I should know. I loved hunting, and I could watch them all shooting their own foot off. You know, as I was a teenager, thinking someone's going to ban you guys. You know, because you just don't come across well. They've learned to come across better subsequently, for the most part. But I do think that the breed itself, the tradition, and all of that is something worth preserving. I do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having that as also one of the reasons that you're coming to this. Because like I say, I didn't get into equine assisted work because I wanted to. I got into it because I had to. And then I decided, well, if I'm in, I might as well try to get good at it. So why do you feel the thoroughbred itself might be under threat? And what can we do to help with that? Because I could see with that, then we could also start looking at breeding, as you said, for other qualities as well that are not just speed. So why do you feel the thoroughbred needs protecting at this point?
I think it needs protecting from the racing industry. It's the racing industry that's under attack. And when you have, even be it just one horse that ends up in distressed circumstances, one horse too many, no horses should fall through the net when they've retired from racing.
Absolutely.
And to me, equine assisted services seemed like a perfect symbiotic fit. I feel that it's a win-win situation for the equine assisted world and for the thoroughbred world. It's an opportunity for the thoroughbred world to give back to society in a very meaningful way and make a difference. And I think it's, for the equine assisted world, it's a way of, as we said before, getting exposure and moving things along and getting equine therapy to a place where it's recognized by all governments around the world and funded.
Funded is the key word there. The thoroughbred industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but they are not known outside of certain programs for giving money to therapeutic programs. I said they're not known for it. I didn't say it doesn't happen. Right. And how can we address that problem? Because right now it would offend anybody's sense of justice to see millions and millions of these horses being bred, tons of money being made on them, then being sort of discarded. And then when they come into their afterlives, when they are lucky enough to do that, the people who take those on, whether it's for therapy or for repurposing them as leisure horses in some way or other, are not necessarily having any financial support to do that from the industry that has discarded them. Now, I know that's not the entirely accurate picture. Can you correct me where I'm wrong on that?
Well, there's something drastically wrong with that picture.
Good. I'm relieved.
Every level that you look at it.
Okay.
100% right. As we referred to earlier, the landscape has changed. We've gone from owner breeders to individual owners and syndicates. And so the land is not there to put them on.
Right.
In the last 20 years, we've seen attempts by the thoroughbred industry to create organizations to filter horses coming from the race track, to put them into competitive equestrian sports, to put them into leisure and trail riding. We have some prison programs, which are absolutely amazing, run by the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation in the States. They have 8, as far as I know.
Great. When the thoroughbreds retire, they get to go to jail. I'm just...
Oh, no, Rupert, that's the most amazing thing. We have one in Ireland at Castlereagh. This is the first equine program in a prison in Europe. And now I think there are 2, if not 3, in England. But if you...
Are they using those, by the way, for therapy, or are they repurposing them there to then be passed on into the leisure industry?
Not necessarily repurposing them. What they're doing is they are creating, in most cases, it's a 6 or 12-week course for the inmates.
Okay.
And they come and they just handle the horses. They lead them out, they pick their feet, they groom them. If they need medical attention, wrapping bandages, things like that, they come out of it with a certificate. So it gives them a skill set.
Okay.
And that's where I wanted to talk to you further, because I think we ought to have your wonderful Takhin
I'm in.
in hand in
I'm in.
all prisons. So that's something I'm advocating for at the moment. And if you think about the horses in prison, think about the prisoner who's emotionally shut down, physically shut down, in that he's devoid of one of your five senses, which is touch. And when you actually get to touch a horse, if you've been devoid of touch and you're deprived of it, that's huge.
Indeed.
Physiological and emotional level,
Yeah, well, oxytocin, absolutely, serotonin.
that is huge. What most people say, I've talked to a couple of people who've run the programs, and I say, well, is there a word one word to describe? And John Evans, who ran the Lowell Prison program for 18 years, said miraculous. No other word for it. The effect. Robert Hall, in Castlereagh in Ireland, said empathy and hope. Business hope.
Yeah, social functionality. Horses are also social animals, right? They demonstrate to us what healthy socialization actually looks like.
If you're in the equine assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children, helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have Takhin equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients? Takhin equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this.
Okay, how much does it cost to run that prison program per year?
That I don't know. The TRF provide the horses, the prison service.
TRF stands for?
Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation in the States.
Which is run by?
Which is run by the TRF, the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation.
Okay.
An organization.
And where do they get their money from?
They, like everything, they fundraise.
So this is my point. So, for example, we talked about one of our good horseboy programs. It's in one of our best. It's in California, Square Peg Foundation. Joelle, who runs it, came up through the racing industry, as you know, was a 16-year-old single mum of a special need kid, making her living as an exercise rider in the very, very tough world of the American racetracks. And, she's now graduated to having, this incredible organization. Everyone who's listening, if you don't know Square Peg Foundation, look it up now and check out what they do, because it's amazing. And she does get grants from the OTTB, the Off the Track Thoroughbred. What's the B for? Oh, Off Track TB Thoroughbred, yeah. Association in the USA. And they do give to her relatively significantly in terms of the yearly budget that she has. But I'm looking here, I just Googled while you were chatting. So I wanted to say, how much does the racing industry generate? So the first thing that comes up in Google for now is 127 billion.
Well,
so if that is indeed true, and who knows, just because Google says it's true doesn't mean it's true, but let's say it's significant amount of dosh. Well, I haven't seen any. And when I've gone and done, now, that's not entirely true, but it can appear that way because my program, okay, it's not my program, but a program that I've trained over there in California, it is supported. Then Liskinnit has definitely been supported by people within the racing industry. That's it. David Doyle's Amazing Place in County Limerick, and so on and so on. So it's not true that there is no support. And some of that support has been quite significant. But there isn't a sort of recognizable institutional thing yet, where the racing industry somehow as a whole comes together and says, okay, out of this 127 billion or whatever it is, we are going to create a 5% budget or a 10% budget to look after, to do the right thing. That has not yet leapt into the public consciousness. It is happening here and there for sure. And where it is, we need to give credit where credit is due. And that's what I'm trying to do. But nonetheless, the perception is not that. And what can we do? When there's that kind of money around, it does just beg the question, why on earth aren't we seeing really significant, noticeable, in the public consciousness kind of support that way? And that could be, as you say, simply because it's taken a while just to catch up. But now that we are having this conversation, people like you within the industry are having this conversation with each other as well as with people like me. What do you think the plan for that is? Because that's from an outsider's perspective, that's just the logical question to ask. Like, got a lot of dosh, let's see it.
I think there's two sections to that question. The first is the aftercare situation. And we talked about changing landscape and the industry being somewhat on the back foot. So they're playing catch up.
Yeah.
What happened was you had some philanthropic individuals who looked at the situation, said, right, this is what we need to do. And they set up the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation one day. Then they set up the Thoroughbred Charities in America. Then Jack Wolf set up Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. Those are the three biggies, and they give out, all three of them give out, two of them give out grants every year. The TAA accredit different rehoming facilities. So that's working. What went wrong there is it wasn't one of our so-called institutions, such as the Jockey Club, that said, or a main body like the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association.
Right.
Said, right, this is an issue. We need to take care of this. No, it was about 5 individuals who did this off their own backs and set organizations up. And then everybody else said, oh, well, it's all taken care of. That's one aspect. So what I'm trying to do now, because I have absolutely zero affiliation to anybody and I'm totally independent, is I go and shake the trees and say, you need to do this, you need to do that. One of the big issues I ran into was, yes, if we give money, where's it going to? Where's the money going?
Where's the accountability? Yeah.
And it just struck me about when I was at Kentucky a couple of weeks ago. And I went, that's what's wrong. We've got to build a structure first that's totally transparent so people can see where the money's going to.
Absolutely.
And it's got to be
How do we do that?
The Jockey Club has to be the umbrella organization that receives the funds and distributes the funds.
Okay.
You keep all the other layers in place. So that's the first part of your question. The second part of your question is more interesting. I've grown up in this industry. It was only when I saw the iThought video, when was that, 2019 perhaps, that they made that? They went to Norway.
Something like that, yeah, relatively recent.
It was only then that this whole world of EAS came on my radar. I didn't know anything about what you were doing. I didn't know
Mm.
what anybody was doing. I knew about the RDA, Riding for the Disabled. I used to, in my 20s, I volunteered with that. So I knew about that. They don't know, is the short answer. And when I spent the last few years going around doing a lot of research and finding out the different places that are providing EAS. And I talk to various people and I go, do you know so-and-so? And they go, no. And I go, well, they're doing the same thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
You need to talk to so-and-so. Who's that? And it's a bit like the thoroughbred aftercare field. A lot of these are sole practitioners.
Yeah.
They have this concept. They bring the concept to fruition. That takes energy. Then they have to run it on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Fundraise it, because where's the money coming from? Because they've now about run out of money. So that takes so much more energy. And you come to them and say, you need to talk to so-and-so. They're just trying to keep their head above water.
Yeah.
But they don't have the energy. They may or may not have the skill set to take it to the next level. So you see that in the aftercare situation with all these individual people who are doing running rescue farms. And you see it in the equine assisted therapy world.
Yeah.
It's generally, and the other problem is, it's generally all women.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Why is that a problem?
Because you're going into an environment certainly in the racing world and for a large part in the corporate world that's male dominated. And somebody said to me during the summer that he mentioned the RDA, Riding for the Disabled. And this colleague of his turned around and went, yeah. You mean women of a certain age leading the pony from the coffee shop to the hairdresser? Yes. And that's the thing. It's like you're a silly, sentimental woman. That's what women do, but we're businessmen. So you have to bring it into their world and say, hey, this is important stuff. We've got a mental health crisis in the Western world.
Yeah.
The racing industry, you have a social license, but you better buck up and pay attention.
Right. And you also, by the way, have a bunch of lost boy sons, grandsons and nephews who need this help.
Yeah.
What's so interesting is that when I've been at shindigs of upper levels of the horse sport world, could be not just racing necessarily, but a lot of them, when you actually get talking to people, you find out that so many of them individually and their families have something going on. But they, of course, are very private. And the old school was also not to complain. And the old school was to put them way out of sight. And so given that the horse industry is an old school thing, it's not surprising that the ethic of we don't really want to look at it, we don't really want to deal with it, is still to some degree there. But I do think I think we've reached a tipping point. I think that has tipped over now. And equally, when you said, the corporate world and the racing world is largely male, we also know that is changing and changing quite rapidly, actually, particularly on the business side of things. That the corporate world is changing from the bottom up, just because the sheer number of people going into the corporate world now is more female than male at the younger, because they're the ones who are doing better at university. So, but we don't want to hang around for that change. And it doesn't mean that just because the men at the top may eventually get replaced by women at the top, that they shouldn't do the right thing while they're there. So it is interesting to me, this thing that you say of when people present themselves as, well, I'm a businessman, why should I care about that? That's never made any sense to me. It's like, well, whether you're a businessman or a street sweeper or a priest or I don't know, whatever you are, you're a human being alive on planet Earth, you'll be dead someday. And it's this thing called the golden rule, right? Why not do some good if you can? Yeah.
Now I'm on my track. I have my title, my position. I'm making money. Do you know what I'm worth? You know, do you see
Yeah,
what
yeah, sure.
I think? These are my priorities. Don't have some woman come to me about, ponies
Yeah.
and mental health.
Or some idiot hippie, like me. Yeah.
So there's that mentality, but life comes at us all and it doesn't care, what you drive or who you are or,
Yeah.
we come to the part, all of us at some point in life come to the part where we have to say uncle, don't we? Or sort of rock back on our haunches and
Indeed.
you get a quick life lesson and you've got to get your priorities sorted. I think we just have a huge opportunity here with that.
Right. So let's talk about what needs to happen on quote unquote your end, which is the industry end, and what needs to happen on quote unquote our end, which is the practitioner side. So you mentioned, let's start with your end first. So you mentioned the Jockey Club, right? Who currently, to my knowledge, do not have some easy to find, really big philanthropic thing for equine assisted work combined with thoroughbred aftercare, unless I'm wrong, and I could well be wrong. So what do we need to do for them to get them to buck up? That's the first thing. And then let's talk after that about what we need with people like me so that we can buck up to meet that challenge.
It comes down to structure, I think. When I first started to look at the equine assisted world, it was just so overwhelmingly fragmented. I couldn't make any sense out of it.
Yeah.
It needs structure. And what I see today is that Horseboy is an organization that has created a community.
Mm.
You have 3 distinct modules. You have the Horseboy module, you have the movement method, and you have Takhin. And you have certification in all of those. I think Horseboy is the place to start. I think you have to, if you're talking about equine assisted services, you have to be able to put something in front of somebody and say, there's a book. You've got a room full of shelves with things like this on it. We'll pull one of those down and say, this is a book. So they know what it is. They can touch it, feel it, understand it.
Okay, that's what we can do on our end.
But one of the things.
But how do we? Let's say I go with you.
Yeah.
Into a room with the Jockey Club dudes, and we're like, all right, we're here to get you guys to do the right thing, effectively.
No, you've got to show them.
Well, okay, fine, but nonetheless, there has to be. We will, of course, do our damnedest to do that. At the same time, of course, there needs to be a certain will on the end of the Jockey Club folks, the people you're going into the room with, to be somewhat predisposed to do something other than say no. And of course, one would think, well, that's just a human thing. Of course, they would want to support this type of thing because it's the right thing to do. But no. So what do we need to do to change the culture within, say, the Jockey Club to be predisposed to act philanthropically
towards equine assisted services?
In this particular case, yes, because I guess you could say that that's actually a good point that you make, because you could say that the Injured Jockey Fund has been doing that philanthropically for generations, and they do quite a lot of work to try to look after their humans. It's now just the next stage. How does one affect that culture? I totally take your point that one needs to go in there with a good structure and all of that stuff. But if there isn't a basic predisposition to do the right thing, no matter how good your structures are, you're dealing with someone who really doesn't want to hear what you've got to say. So that's a cultural thing.
But it's not so much culture as an educational thing.
Okay. How do you separate the two?
I promise you, they don't know.
Okay.
Nobody knows about equine assisted services.
So we need to go talk to
people in the racing industry, equine assisted services. They look at me and they pause for a moment and then they go, you mean riding for the disabled?
Right.
I go, yeah, but it's so much more than that. So that's where the Equine Assisted World you haven't gotten your message out to explain to people this is doing. This is the science behind it. Do you know how long it took me to find this amazing person called Rupert Isaacson, who was standing on a video by a whiteboard, drawing out little stick men and showing oxytocin and cortisol and the Kinsey cells and beta.
Well, you're good.
That took me forever to find.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you why it took you forever to find, because
when
the Jockey Club doesn't give me $1 million a year to go out and publicize it. And so the difficulty is that we do what we can, right? So we do put stuff out on YouTube and we do, but if we were to do like an actual publicity campaign, we would need that funded, and we would have to justify why we're using that to fly our flag rather than to do the work. So up until now, because, let's say we've been around for 20 years, what we've tended to spend our money on when we've fundraised is servicing people and helping new places get started and giving grants to those new places and so on and so on, because that's where the need is. If you're in my position, I'm a dad, if I'm choosing to spend this dollar here to educate people, even though I know long-term we need to, and here to serve this family who's in crisis, well, I know where I'm going to spend that dollar. So that is, of course, exactly what the equine assisted world needs from the more established industry, is the money to go out and do that education, because it's not just to the horse industry, it's to government and to regulatory bodies and so forth, insurance companies, all of that. So I'm with you. It's just that, as you said, you answered that point earlier where you said, well, people are but so busy kind of doing what they're doing and bootstrapping it. And, like if I go to talk to the Jockey Club, for example, let's say we actually do that, which means you say, Rupert, at 2:00 on Tuesday, there's something of something. We're going to go and have this meeting in Virginia or Ireland or Kentucky or Newmarket or wherever. So I will then have to get my butt on a plane, go there. It's going to cost me a minimum of $2,000 to just go there and make my case. Minimum. That's before we've even talked about, I don't know, maybe doing 2 or 3 more places, because then you say, okay, well, now we're on the road. Maybe actually we should also go to the French and we should also go to the Irish and da-da-da-da. So now it becomes $5,000, $6,000.
And nothing will have happened.
And
the day. Nothing.
Right. And it's not like the organization has said, hey, we've heard about you. This is great. Here's $6,000. Come and talk to us. Right. So I'm not saying we can't get around this issue. I'm just exploring the practicalities of how do we strategize this? You're sitting there within the racing industry. I'm sitting here with a product that works for the racing industry and for the
humanity
get served by the Thoroughbred. So how do we reach them?
Well, I think what you have to remember is the equine assisted service industry is a new industry.
Yeah.
So you're doing what you would do in any new industry, is you're working the grassroots, you're making a family.
Absolutely.
And that's where you have to spend your time and energy and money. And you've been doing that for the last 20, 25 years. Am I right?
Yeah. Not to mention bring my own son up,
Yeah.
Which is a certain thing as well. Yeah.
And I met Rowan at Tribe in Kiltrin this August. And he's the most lovely, lovely young man. And he's got a beautiful speaking voice.
Yeah, he does.
And it's a gorgeous speaking voice. And I came away from there and I thought, oh my God. Rupert was told that, when he was, 3.5, that this is, that's it. We can't do any more from you on your own. And the same that with David Doyle's daughter, take her home and love her. And I thought about Rowan. And he's a big boy. He's a big man.
Yeah.
and he's strong,
Yeah.
the gentle giant. And
Yeah.
had Rupert not gone on this journey and been curious and inquisitive and, just tenacious about, finding a way through this and finding a Temple Grandin, Rowan would be a young man now who was nonverbal. Can you imagine how frustrated and how angry he would be?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a totally different scenario. Those are the sort of stories that you need to
Yeah.
people. Something that gets them. I think what you do is, yes, you poke away at the jockey club. I can do that, and it's not costing me anything because I'm in the States. But I think what you do is you start to educate the racing community, and you find people who have connections to autistic children. And it's, the incidence of autism now it's pretty high.
Yeah, it is.
I was just reading something this morning about how they're saying, I think it's Robert Kennedy saying this,
1 in 12.
that Tylenol, pregnant women who took Tylenol, that's what causes autism. So anyway, there's a large incidence of autistic.
Yeah, there is. Whatever you think of what the causes are, it went from 1 in 10,000 to under 1 in 20 in 30 years. Something has happened. Yes.
What?
But where I come in is whatever has happened, we can do something about it. That's neuroplasticity. We can rebuild brains. We know this. And you can do it with strokes. You can do it with traumatic brain injuries. You can do it. And we can certainly do it with regressive autism, because that's often what we're seeing is kids that were developing somewhat normally, and at some point they took some sort of hit. Now, it's too controversial to go into what that hit might have been. And also, from my point of view, almost irrelevant, because I'm dealing with the aftermath. And what we find is that, well, yeah, actually we can do a lot. So I'm with you. And of course, I'm playing devil's advocate against myself here, because Horseboy currently is in Berlin talking to the Bundestag, the German parliament. You met the amazing Henrik and Gitti Berkhoff and their son, Julian, in the wheelchair, and their story. And spoiler alert, lads, I just yesterday did a podcast with Gitti Berkhoff. You need to listen to that one. And so they're and David Doyle is with them. So David Doyle has flown from Ireland, and they are talking to the German parliament about getting state funding for horseboy movement method and other, not just us, but all sorts of equine assisted things. And this builds on the back of what David Doyle has already done in Ireland, getting those programs supported by government there. So I'm playing devil's advocate against myself. We have actually been doing this kind of thing. And of course, as you know, Joelle Dunlap from Square Peg in California has been in Kentucky several times. She is working on that level. And I also know that you are getting something together up your sleeve at the Curragh in Ireland somewhere in the next 12 months or so. We'll all be there, and I'll get my ass there, of course.
Oh.
So, but I think the reason why I'm asking you these questions and you answer them on this podcast is because I'm throwing this out now to you, the listeners and the viewers. We can't expect people to know what we do if we don't tell them. So for every single one of you that is out there doing that good work, and you are all out there doing this good work, put the bugger on YouTube.
Just a short little YouTube film. It can be 60 seconds. Anything, Rupert, that conveys what you're doing.
And don't worry if it's crap.
Doesn't matter.
Because then you'll do another one and it will be better. And you'll do another one and it will be better. And also really good is your higher functioning autists, get them to make little films about you and put it out there. But what we can't, I love the Irish term giving out. We can't give out. We can't complain if we are not. So I asked those challenging questions to Suzi just now. saying, well, what can the thoroughbred industry do for us? And, well, we know they can give us money and we need to go in there and tell them why they should and what they should do. But where she's right is they need also to hear from us. So what about open letters? What about, campaigns of, I don't know why my brain is blanking on the word, when everyone signs their name to something. Yes. Petition. Thank you. Good Lord. I need another cup of tea, clearly. All of these things make a difference. And also reaching out to your local racetrack. So we talked about David Doyle. He came up with a really good idea in Ireland, which is to go to individual race courses, which stand idle in between race meetings. And they have these amazing facilities. And they're actually looking for reasons to be relevant. So they do, stag parties, and they do this and they do that. He went to them and said, what about equine assisted work happening in these places in between race meetings? And they went, that's a good idea. So back in the spring of this year, I found myself at Limerick Racecourse with David Doyle, with a whole bunch of autistic riders in jockey silks on Thoroughbreds, where we began, which were donation Thoroughbreds, at the racetrack. And this was really interesting to me because they were then being taken back to their old world, these Thoroughbreds, now with very vulnerable riders on them, and parading in the warm-up area as if they were about to go and race. And we were on TV, everyone was being interviewed, and we were talking about why this is important. It's great that they absolutely stepped up and supported us. And I was thinking in the back of my mind, will there be any kind of return to previous free therapy behavior? This will be an interesting exercise. Well, there wasn't. The retraining was so effective and so thorough that even when these thoroughbreds were put back sensorily, not just in the location where they had been getting ready to race, but the rider is now wearing jockey silks and boots and all that. And don't think that horses don't notice that sort of thing. Of course they do. And yet, not a foot put wrong. They could not have been better ambassadors for their own breed. It was extraordinary.
And
so,
vulnerable children.
Indeed. Very, very vulnerable passengers.
So,
if you are an equine assisted outfit, is there anything stopping you from approaching your own local racecourse? Remember that these are for individual businesses that are run. Is there anything from stopping you from approaching your local hunt and their point-to-point meeting, which they have every year? There's nothing stopping you. And don't worry if they say no. If they say no, go to the next one. I've generally found that there's a 3-no rule. People will say no 3 times, and then they realize that you're just not going to go away. And then they're like, all right, fine, just to shut you up. And then they realize, oh, actually, we come out of this looking quite good. You know what I mean? So
a little booth, have a little table there with some flowers, some toys or whatever, something to bring them in and just tell them what you're doing. Because I promise you, people in the racing industry do not know what's happening in the equine assisted world. It's a relatively new area. And everybody today has got their head down in their own field, and they're not looking over the hedge. Unless you get an idiot like me who's just like, what's happening over there?
Well, curiosity, thank God for it. Okay, I'm optimistic. I think you're going to do it, Suzi. I think that you are going to be the catalyst that makes that difference. I met you, I hung out with you in Kilcloon, and I thought, oh, this woman is a force. You didn't have to show up to our tribe day.
Well, you wouldn't keep me away.
But you had other things in your life to do.
I show up everywhere.
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there.
You live between different spots and all of this. And you made time, you took time, and you didn't just show up alone. You brought a couple of interested parties and you showcased us. You didn't need to do that. So I'm both grateful and very optimistic because I know talent when I see it, and you're clearly going to get the job done. And rising tide lifts all boats. So yes, Horseboy will be in there doing the things that you do, but we will be turning around to lots of other programs and saying, come along with us. Let's not sit in our own silos, and certainly let's not, Horseboy won't be trying to like hold the money from the racing industry to itself. Quite the opposite. What I would like to do is work on setting up funds that are just purely merit-based across the equine assisted field, because what we do, as you know, is fairly specific in terms of neuroplasticity. But there's all kinds of other programs out there as well. You mentioned the prison ones and Horseback UK, what they do. There's a bunch out there. I would like to be a catalyst in making sure that everybody gets served. So I do think when we have you on again next year to give the report on what the progress has been with the Jockey Club, I think you're going to be reporting progress. There's something else I want to ask you about, though. Do you remember a bit earlier in this conversation, I said you got into this as much because you wanted to protect the thoroughbred horse as to help people like my son. And I think that that's perfectly valid and honest and good. Tell me why the thoroughbred itself, in terms of its bloodlines, is a little bit vulnerable right now. This was really interesting to me. I didn't know this until you told it to me. We tend to think of thoroughbreds as like this thing. It's been there forever. It'll always be there. Not so much, perhaps, it seems. Tell me what it is and why you care.
Can I divert you? Very. I won't be for long. With Horseboy, you have three modalities. The Takhin in-hand dressage work that you do.
Yeah.
Pushes into collection and balance for Horseboy.
Yeah.
They can create those big rocking motions that will rock the children's hips and cradle oxytocin.
Yeah.
I saw Terry Brosnan demonstrate.
She runs the Horseboy place at Kilcloon. Yeah. Yeah.
And a light bulb went off because she said, we get them to cross over the midline. That's what is coming over the midline. Horses, thoroughbred horses, certainly don't do that, ever. And it suddenly occurred to me, my God, every yearling that has been started needs to do this work.
Absolutely.
How to cross over the midline. Because I can't tell you how many 2-year-olds and older horses I've ridden that will try to buck. And you go, God, don't do that, you idiot. You're going to fall down. Because they don't know where their feet are, their front feet are, and they end up going over tea kettle. Not only does it give them the body awareness and where their feet are, it creates balance. It
creates neuroplasticity in the horse.
And posture, and it creates neuroplasticity in the horse because it's left-right brain.
Yeah. They can think. Yeah.
And it brings them into collection. But even more than that, it gives them confidence. So to me, if you were to do this with a yearling as you're starting it, you're getting a much more balanced, collected horse that knows where his feet are, where his body is. You're going to end up with a sounder horse.
100%. And you can actually rehab the injuries this way too, because it's like a yoga.
And it then sets them up for further career options.
Absolutely. Because you put the building blocks in for the jumping and the dressage.
Yeah.
That they might need later, which is just about balancing yourself. You've set for them.
You do. I think Takhin is the bridge into the thoroughbred world. And on Friday, Terry Brosnan is very kindly going to come down to Jessie Harrington's Commonstown, and she's going to teach my 3-year-old son Takhin in the indoor school. And I'm hoping that we can share it to Jessie and she'll see the results of that.
Who is Jessie Harrington?
Jessie Harrington is Ireland's national treasure.
Oh.
She is a racehorse trainer. She was a very successful steeplechase trainer. She was on the Olympic 3-day team, and she's a very successful flat horse trainer. And she's one of the larger trainers in Ireland, and just an exceptional human being. And I'm lucky enough to have my horse and some other horses there.
Okay.
But he said, yes, that'll be fine.
Oh, wonderful.
So what I'd like to see is, I would like to see the thoroughbred world endorsing the Takhin method.
Yeah. I agree with you. That's where the crossover is, because it serves the horse as much as it serves the human. And just for those listeners who are not familiar, because not everyone who listens to this knows what our programs are, Takhin, Takhin, is the in-hand work, lunging and long reining. So it's not ridden, there's no ridden work, where you teach the horse all the dressage stuff and the strengthening and the suppling that they would need to know to do the dressage. You use this as its own therapy to prepare, maintain, and rehab horses. But of course, we then get autistic people, veterans, service users of any kind, to be the trainers that do the work, so that it's a sort of circular, holistic, win-win-win thing. And then also for the people who run the program, any of you who are running programs, you know how stressed you are because you don't have enough time to condition and maintain your horses because you've just got so many clients coming through the door. Well, what Takhin does is it makes those conditioning sessions the session that you do with your client. So instead of trying to separate out that time and be in stress and time conflict, you have no time conflict anymore. So yes, I agree. And so much of that work, if you do it very early, because the horse isn't bearing any weight, you can introduce all the lateral work, you can introduce the piaffe, you can introduce all these things without in any way negatively affecting the horse, because there is no weight being borne. So I'm very, very pleased to hear that that's about to happen, and a bit nervous because now the pressure's on. Do a good job.
But trying to set them up to be sounder horses in the long run.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Knows where his body is, his feet are, and they're balanced. That's half the battle.
It is. And this brings me to your book. Okay, so I asked you, so you diverted me from my question about why is the horse itself vulnerable at the moment. So you wrote a book called The Byerly Turk, right? And one of the reasons why I find the Byerly Turk an interesting historical place to put one's focus as a horse person and a therapy person is because that story, so the Byerly Turk being one of the foundation stallions of the Thoroughbreds, what often isn't known is that this was a warhorse. So it was acquired somehow at the Siege of Vienna, I think, was it? Or at Buda. Yeah. So when the Ottomans were trying to take over Europe, and remember they got as far as Vienna, and all of the European powers had to suddenly stop punching each other up and go, hold on a second. Hold on. If we don't get our shit together for at least 5 years, these guys are just going to take it all from us and it will all be irrelevant. So maybe we should cooperate here. So they did. And at the end of the 17th century, they, managed to secure Europe from the Ottoman threat, but it was not done without great effort. And in these coalitions of military that came together to do this, many of those European countries, when they were reorganizing their military at that time, had Irish contingents, because the Anglo-Irish nobility and the Irish poor peasants often sold themselves as mercenaries. It was one of the ways that they made a living, and they all had a sort of fighting spirit, and they were great horsemen and so on. So they went and made a few bob fighting for the Germans or fighting for the Austrians or this or that or the other, as well as obviously for the Brits from time to time. And so there's this chap, Byerly, he shows up at this siege and he somehow acquires this horse, and there's all these different stories, right? About, did he buy it? Did he nick it? Did he exchange it? Was it gifted? Whatever happens, he brings this thing home. And we talked about racing having started with the steppe cultures, the Turkoman horse is, of course, one of the purest throwbacks to that early steppe culture. And it's both a dressage horse and a racing horse. And it is still to this day. Turkoman horses rock. They're rad. They're fantastic. I know people who've got them, and they're brilliant because they have all the fire, but they have all the nonce as well. And you can use them in multiple purposes. They just don't grow terribly big. So you're probably not going to jump 1.60 m on them if you're a biggish human. But nonetheless, they are a really versatile. So of course, they're ancestors of the modern thoroughbred. This bloke brings it home to Ireland. And guess what? It shows up at another battle. The battle that basically decides that England is going to be England. The Battle of the Boyne, which weirdly and confusingly is fought in Ireland because it ends up being a Protestant Catholic thing. And I could go into why that happened in one of my more boring old dead dudes history of dressage thing. I think I will. But suffice to say,
Relatively little bloodshed in England, but a lot in Ireland.
Indeed. We like to do our proxy wars, yeah. But also, to be fair, any time that France or someone else wanted to mess with England, he'd do it through the back door of Scotland or Ireland, bite him in the butt, and then that would turn our attention over there, and then he could do naughty things to us somewhere else. And this, of course, is one of those big, but this was a decisive battle in terms of British history, because it basically decided, would we be Protestant or would we be Catholic? And the Protestants win. And Barley is on the winning side, I believe. And then, so this horse, before it becomes a racehorse, so we think of thoroughbreds, as you said, they don't cross the midline, they just go zoom. But at least one of their ancestors was crossing the midline a lot, because if you fight hand to hand on a horse, you use the Takhin system. The Takhin system that we're talking about was originally created for three things. I'm talking thousands of years ago, not by me, Rupert Isaacson. It was to put your horse able to move in 3 dimensions. Why do you want to do that? Because you want to catch cows, because you're a steppe herder and you live off cows and goats and sheep, and they move in 3 dimensions and try and run away from you and stop and spin. And so you've got to have a horse that can do the same thing, which means you've got to train them to go to the side and cross the midline and do pirouette. Then, of course, you might go to battle because I want to nick Suzi's cows, and I've nicked her cows. I'm riding over there. Now she's noticed that I've nicked her cows. She wants to nick them back. So we have a running fight. If she's a better horseman than me, she will win the fight. So her horse is trained for battle in this stop, start, spin, laterally stuff, including piafs and other things like that. And then, of course, we have a sort of display, fun way of doing it where we can get together in festivals and prance about on our horses looking pretty to try and impress each other and sell the semen of our horses. And this has been going on for thousands of years. But what's interesting to me is that this horse that's the foundation horse of the Zoom Zoom industry was actually 3-dimensional spinny, spinny, spinny horse.
So we've come full circle.
Yeah.
Which is lovely. The interesting thing, Rupert, is that the 3 foundation styles in Thoroughbred, it is rumored that the Barley Turk took part in a race at Down Royal, which is not the Down Royal racecourse we have today, but it was actually on the site of Downpatrick with 2 other horses. But that is rumored. The Godolphin Arabian was never ridden.
Never ridden.
And the Darley Arabian came basically as a show horse. He wasn't raced either.
So did people just look at the qualities of these horses unridden and say, you know what, we're breeding to them? Well, how did that arise?
It happened because there were a number of what they called Oriental horses in England in the 16th century, 16th, 17th century. And there were in excess of, I've counted 190 Oriental stallions. And some of them are quite prevalent in the early stud book. So the fascinating thing is, why is it only 3 stallions from at least 190? And it comes down to the 3 of their descendants, who were a cocktail of the 3 stallions, but Matcham, Herod, and Eclipse. And they are either side from the Darley line and the Godolphin line or the Barley. So it's a combination. So it's not just the Y chromosome, it's probably a combination of the mitochondria and the Y chromosome that's given us our foundation of the thoroughbred breed. So it's actually match inherit in eclipse.
Okay, now you told me that, and I didn't know this, that the Byerly line and the Godolphin line are disappearing from the thoroughbred.
That's gone.
Why? And why should we care?
Well, I read the book and then I thought I better put my money where my mouth was. So I thought, well, you better go and sort of breed some of these horses and then maybe somebody will join you on your little quest. That hasn't happened yet. But I was at the South Newmarket a couple of years ago, and one of mine called Richard Kent, who had a filly of mine, he goes, "Suzi, why that line hasn't lasted?" He said, "Because you need time and patience and staff." And he said, "Lippy here was trying to put your filly on the hot walker and she wasn't having any of it." And I went, "What did I tell you? These horses, you have to ask them. You cannot tell them what to do.
Absolutely.
Tell them what to do. It's game over. It's not happening." And they don't forget. The two lines are very intelligent.
Interesting.
Barley line is extremely intelligent.
So you think people have stopped breeding them just because they require more?
They require more horsemanship and more
I see.
patience. And they tend to be quite hot. They're on their toes. They're not bad horses at all. They're all lovely people.
But they're sharp.
Don't cross them. Don't come in telling them what to do, or they're different. The Godolphin Arabians tend to be quite bullheaded, and they're tough and they're determined. And those are two qualities, the intelligence and that spirit, that high mettle that the Barley line has, and the toughness and the determination that the Godolphin line have. Those are essential qualities for racehorses.
So now you say, okay, so I can understand people are now trying to cut corners. They don't want a horse that you have to work so hard for. So they're trying to breed to an easier bloodline. Speak to me as a total rookie. Why does that even matter? Like, why don't you say, okay, well, fine, breed that line out, breed to another line?
Well, that's what we're doing. We've bred exclusively to the Darley Arabian line. And temperaments, a lot of times, are much, much easier than a Barley Turret temperament, by far. The Barleys you have to treat a little bit like fillies in that you've got to be
So why do we need then the Barley line? Why do we need the Godolphin line?
And for that high mettle, they have that fire. They have that courage. They're all very brave, intelligent. So you need, in a racehorse, you need that fire. The girl has the determination and the toughness. You need that when the chips are down.
There must also be an inbreeding issue as well. I mean, if you start narrowing down to just one line of three, surely there's going to be issues that come up cognitively and physically eventually, because there just isn't enough outside blood, right?
Hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
Will happen.
You think it will happen?
In about 10 years' time, Rupert, every single thoroughbred will trace back to a horse of 1913 called Polaris.
Okay.
That's how we've narrowed down.
And then we end up with what, three horses with three heads?
Probably just horses that are soft and don't have that will to win. You know, it'll be a different breed, I think.
I should imagine too, physically, they may not be as tough. So that, would we see more injuries on the racetrack? Would we see more tendons popping? Would we see more bones breaking?
No, maybe not, you know. I don't know.
But inbreeding in any animal, it never seems to be a great idea, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Seems to be something to avoid.
So,
you know, we know with dog, it's not a good idea, right?
We've seen it in dogs. We've seen it in the English Bulldog. We've seen it in the French Bulldog. In Charles Spaniel, where they're breeding, the heads are, the skull is too small for their brains, and the windpipe is too small.
Particularly when I'm crossing the line over into the horseboy work, where we're doing the mounted work, I actually need a bit of a grumpy old, slightly dominant type of horse. I need that because those horses tend not to spook. If you go to a horse boy stable, you'll tend to find a whole bunch of like dominant grumps, because they've all got that kind of uncle or auntie brain where they're like, right then, that's the sort of horse's attitude. But that is actually what will often keep you and the child alive when you're out there and a wild boar jumps out, or someone opens an umbrella in front of your horse or whatever. And of course, with Horseboy, we need to be out there in the world. We do not spend all our time in arenas, because if you've got autoism, auto meaning the Greek word for the self, if the problem is I've got selfism, autoism, I'm locked within the self, the difficulty is the relationship with the exterior world, then the last thing I need to do when I'm working with that person is be inside some big industrial sterile shed with sand in it. You know, that's not the outside world. If the difficulty is the relationship with the exterior world, then that is where we must go. And in order to do that safely, I need horses that have, as you say, have that courageous spirit. And sometimes that means, we have to work a little harder with them. And we certainly have to work more in partnership with them. Like horseboy horses, we don't tell them what to do, because we're not picking fights. We can't pick fights. Like, if I've got your autistic child, I can't pick a fight. I need my horse to have that attitude of, I'm with you. You know, I can make decisions. Yeah.
Rupert, when you have a child on a horse and been coming to you for a few weeks,
Mhm.
same horse every time, do they build a relationship with the horse which is different to a relationship, that a deeper relationship than they'd have with another human being? Or how does it work?
Well, the answer, go ahead, sorry.
There has to be that trust element.
There does. No, I mean, the answer is both yes and no, meaning that not every person, because we're not just dealing with kids, who comes for our services is necessarily massively motivated by horses. So if we have someone coming in through the door who their horses are, I quite like the horse, but really I prefer other things, then, as you know, with Horseboy and movement method and so on, we're very versatile. We can follow their interests, include the horse in that as much or as little as seems relevant. But generally over time, because the horses are around, they're going to build relationships with them, because they're social animals that you build relationships with. And then you get a certain number of people who are very horse motivated and will absolutely forge very close and personal relationships with the horses. And then within that, there's another subset who will either generalize, they love all horses kind of equally, or some of them will be, no, like, this is my horse. So we get all of those ranges of personality type that come through the door, just as we get all these different ranges of horse personality type, some of whom love all people, some of whom only love a couple of people, some of whom don't really care for people that much, but hey, you know, and we will work with them where they are. So you get all of the above. But what we need, of course, is a horse that is versatile, who can be as much or as little horses as necessary in that particular moment and has that sort of judgment. And also, we need a horse that, when you ask him to switch jobs, can do so in a professional manner and say, oh, you changed the job, and not say, well, you changed the job description on me. So, yeah. We've all seen that in certain horses, yeah. That, no, we look for the, and so that's where it's interesting you talk about the Byerly line. When you say, if that line is going, that sort of courageous, slightly independent, think for itself line, that rings a bell with me as a therapeutic practitioner, going, we actually need that kind of line, because when they come to do the work with us after their racing career, or perhaps they're not even bred for racing, perhaps they're just bred for this.
It's interesting you say that, because that occurred to me during the summer. I thought, these horses actually would be ideally suited.
Absolutely. And just because it's a thoroughbred, does it have to be bred for racing? No, right?
Because
So would it be interesting, this would be really interesting to me, would be to identify what's the subset within the thoroughbreds that are like the best suited for our kind of work, and say, why can't we just breed those as well? Like, why does it always have to be a retired horse or from the racetrack? Just because it's thoroughbred doesn't mean it has to race, right?
The nice thing about getting them from the racetrack is that they have, from conception, they've been handled.
That's true.
All come through basically the same sort of protocol. You know what you're getting. You know that they know how to gallop. You know how they know how to switch leads.
They know how to be in a group together.
They know how to be in a routine. Their routine.
And take on a job. Yeah.
Another little beef that I've got, and now is not the place to air it, but I
Oh,
hear
go on.
to horse welfare, and I keep saying to people, you've got to remember, thoroughbreds are not quite the same as any other bush breed because they're a hybrid. They've never been out on the plains by themselves. They've always positive. They've always been in stalls. And yes, you can turn them out and that, but they don't necessarily take to being left out in the elements. They're very, very much creatures of routine.
Well, also, I think because they come from those desert lines, desert people keep their horses very close to them. You know, we all know about the sort of Bedouin idea of you have the horse in your tent with you. Of course, not every single one of your horses. I think they're a bit selective about which horse they bring in. But nonetheless, yeah, they're horses that are bred to be very human focused. I think this is very true. And I think this is often not overlooked even, but sort of, it's not that it's ignored because people don't know, but I think people have a perception of thoroughbreds, this wild, uncontrolled thing. Whereas actually, as you say, no, they're selectively bred for humanness a bit as well, peopleness.
Very much so. They have a lot of contact with people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like any horse. Not every horse is going to be suitable for your work. Not every
Indeed.
And you need your big old cold bloods and your warm bloods and your hairy pony and
Absolutely.
But I think the key is letting people know what's happening in the equine assisted world and putting the science behind it, telling them why. You're the only person that I found in this area, it was the horseboy people, that will actually tell you this is the science. And if you've got the science, then you have buy-in because you have somebody who has an autistic child and they're going, oh, it's not just about being with somebody and putting my child on a horse and leading him around. It's about getting his hips to move and he's releasing oxytocin.
Absolutely.
So something's happening in his body. It's when he gets in that space with the horse, the magnetic field of the horse's heart is going to affect my child's heart. It's
Absolutely.
breathing. He's going to learn quite quickly that he has to somewhat self-moderate. You explain those because when people hear about equine assisted services, they think it's putting or with horses and it's an outside and it's nice and it's healthy and it's good. Tell them why.
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. Without the science, to be fair to people, why should they support something that isn't explained? And it's one of my favorite beefs, actually, is when I hear my own colleagues saying, well, you can't really explain what's going on. It's like, it's a miraculous thing. It's like, no, it's not. And that's a hard thing to fund. There actually is something going on quite systematically and physiologically. And it's not that hard to get your head around it. Rock your hips, get this feel-good hormone that calms your nervous system, that also makes you communicate, hey, 2 for 1. And then because you're crossing the midline all the time, which is solving problems, your brain produces a protein. It's called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That turns into a stem cell, which turns into a neuron. Billions of them, so the brain produces more of itself. And among those neurons is these things with a funny name. Sounds like a Pokemon character, Purkinje cells. And they govern social skills. So if you do all that stuff together, you're going to see change. That's not a hard thing to learn to just wrap off your tongue. And it's worth, I think, the while of equine practitioners to practice that, because when we have to advocate for ourselves, and if, you know, one of my other peeves sometimes is when I'm doing trainings and someone will say, and I'll say, look, you kind of actually do need to know this. You kind of do need to be able to somebody even memorize this, or at least put it up on your wall so you can refer to it when people come into your program and say, why is it working? Like, well, it's that thing, that diagram up there. Or when funders come in, they look at it and say, oh, it's that diagram. Oh, even better, when the children and adults that you serve, they will learn the neuroscience. My son knew that neuroscience by the time he was 11. Gives them a user manual to their brain. It's a tool. It makes people more independent to know these things. And sometimes I get, well, I'm not interested in science.
No, everybody has to know why.
Yeah.
But, and especially if you're going to put your hand in your pocket.
Yes.
Have some woman come to you and say, well, we can't explain it. It's just that this happens and it's marvelous. It's a miracle.
Yes. And it's just esoteric. And
say,
well, that sounds grand, but I'm not going to fund it. Yeah.
Let me take my coffee and walk on now. But show them that this is something that you can replicate.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
The Newmarket Pony Academy, which is at the British Racehorse and Horse Racing School in Newmarket, they ran a 5-day course. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not. No, tell me about it.
Well, they're in Newmarket at the British Horse Racing School. And they realized that there are lots of people in Newmarket who know nothing about horses.
Yeah.
They went to the elementary school and they took out children who were having trouble in school and had some social issues and different things. And they've created this 5-day course. They have a little classroom and they have a little book and they have pictures of dandy brush, body brush, both thick. And you have to write what this one does. And then how would you muck out a store? And they have to do that. And then they get a tape measure and a measuring stick. How many centimeters is 12.2? Go measure your pony. How many centimeters is that? So they're doing math, they're doing things like that. And then they take them out in the garden, they put them on the ponies in the indoor school, they lead them around. By the end of the week, those kids are trotting around there.
What organization is this?
It's called the Newmarket Pony Academy.
Okay. And it's run by?
I think it's backed by Godolphin, actually. Sheikh Mohammed has done an enormous...
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you for turning me on to this. I had no idea.
The British Horse Racing School in Newmarket, and it's run by a wonderful lady called Penny Taylor.
Will you connect me? I would love to have a conversation.
And I think the Queen might be one of the patrons. She's certainly been
From
there.
beyond the grave. Sorry.
Queen Camilla. But Rupert, the testimonials, I mean, I read some of those and they bring you to tears. There was one little girl, I think it was a little girl, might have been a boy, and she said, "This is my happy place."
How long have they been running the program?
I'd say 5 years anyway.
So isn't it interesting that here's something big going on? I'd never heard of it until I met you. Yeah.
I talked to somebody who's very involved in racing, or whose son is very involved in racing, and she has grandchildren in Newmarket. And I said to them, Newmarket, what's that to me? And I go, please, tell me. Don't tell me you've never heard of it. You, of all people, never heard of it. Living in Newmarket on the Fornham Road and did not know. Yeah.
Okay, so once again, this is at the British Racing School, and it's called the Newmarket Pony Academy.
And
the lady running it is?
Penny Taylor.
Penny Taylor. This sounds like somebody we need to be talking to. Yeah.
Yeah.
This sounds like someone who gets things done.
And it's backed by Godolphin.
Okay. Wonderful.
So no, it's
So there's something that answered my question. What, the people well in the establishment of the racing industry, what are they doing? Well, there's something they're doing. And I didn't know until I met you and you told me.
And that happens, this is the same old story. People in the equine assisted world don't know what other people are doing in those sectors.
Guilty as charged. I'm busy doing my thing. But that's the point of this podcast, right? Is that we exchange information and we don't just wait till we meet each other at conferences,
And you get done. So no, this is great. And let's rock on. Let's
all right.
Venue together for next year. And let's get the equine assisted world well publicized within the racing industry. And
let's make a deal for our listeners. Suzi and I will pledge to do this podcast again in a year to 18 months, depending on, and we will give you a report of where we've gotten to. And it will, wherever it is, it will be further along than where we are now.
They have that they started in the last 3 years by a guy called Bobby Beavers is Autism and Racing. And there's several race courses around England that are set up for autistic people and children.
To come and enjoy the day as a sort of sensory friendly. Okay. Yeah.
And
Talk to them too.
where I live in Ireland, down the road is Maynooth, which you're familiar. And it has a big sign as you come into Maynooth, and it says autism friendly town.
And that, of course, Maynooth is right where Kilcloon is, which is our horseboy centre there. But it's okay. So, but these are good initiatives, but I'm still not hearing the word jockey club. So that's what we need to do is we need to go to them and say, lads, it's not just people like Horseboy. You've got stuff within your own industry there ready to go to support.
And the more people within the industry, Rupert, that you can get on this bus, show them and make them aware of it.
Okay.
You've got a bus moving forwards.
All right, sold. I'll be there. Set up the gig. I'll show up.
Put pressure on the establishment.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Deal.
I felt
All right, then. Should we wrap it up there then? But before you go there, some people will want to know your book. Tell us the title again and where they can get it.
It's out of print.
Best books always are.
You can't get it. It was called Barley, the Thoroughbreds Ticking Time Bomb.
Barley, the Thoroughbreds Ticking Time Bomb. Why is it a ticking time bomb?
Because the line was fizzling out. Yeah.
But they could get it on Medimops and they could get it on Amazon, right?
No, I don't think you can get it on Amazon anymore. You could try.
Just because it's out of print doesn't mean it's not on Amazon.
Well, it might be. It might
Yeah,
be.
yeah. No secondhand stuff. All right. I will get one.
All right. Well, I will rustle one up and send you.
Thank you. All right. In that case, lads, we will reconvene with Suzi and give you a report of where we got to. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine assisted field or are considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Takhin Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop. You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.